Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Baldrige Foundation's quarterly webinar. Today's topic is going to be using the Baldrige Performance Excellence Framework to improve organizational resilience and sustainability. As a reminder, I'd like to thank all of our donors and sponsors who make today's webinar possible, especially those members of the Mac Baldrige Society who are the trustees of the Institute for Performance Excellence. And here are today's guests. We have with us today Drs. Jan Garfield from Walden University, Meredith Wentz from the University of Wisconsin-Stout, Marilyn Powell from West Coast University, Suzanne Collins from Aero News Network, Michael Dillard from Allstate Insurance Company, and Alan Turner from the NASA Glenn Research Center. Following their presentation, we will have questions by the moderator and a brief update from the Baldrige Performance Excellence Program by Bob Fangmeyer, and a few closing comments. So now, Jan, I will turn it over to you and your team.
Wonderful. Thank you, Al. Thank you very much. As Al said, our conversation today is about using the Baldrige Excellence Framework to improve organizational resilience and sustainability. We will be presenting the results of a research project, and members of that research team are with us as panelists today. Marilyn, could you tell us about Walden?
Very well. I'm really proud to talk about Walden University. Walden is an online for-profit university headquartered in Minneapolis, Minnesota, established very uniquely in 1970 by Bernie and Rita Turner, who were educators and felt passionately about creating a program for working adults so that they could complete or pursue doctoral degrees. Walden now offers bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees, both your traditional research PhD and professional doctorates, and also sponsors several peer-reviewed and refereed academic journals. Walden was recently acquired by Adtalem Global Education, which provides additional synergy to achieve the university's mission to affect positive social change. In addition, the university's business and related programs are accredited by ACBSP and have also achieved higher levels of recognition, including the bronze and silver awards based on the Baldrige framework. In addition, these programs are ranked at the achievement level with the Performance Excellence Network. So this is an esteemed group who are very excited to talk with you today about findings.
I'd like to talk to you a bit about how this research project began. Walden was approached by Bob Fangmeyer from the Baldrige Performance Excellence Program and Brian Lassiter from the Alliance for Performance Excellence in 2021 to research and capture and document evidence related to the use of the Baldrige framework by senior leaders to achieve organizational sustainability and resilience, especially in the face of crises such as the COVID-19 pandemic. The National Institute of Standards and Technology manages the Baldrige program, and serving as a research agent for NIST by extension, the members of this Baldrige research team knew that we needed to meet and exceed the standards of an agency of the US Department of Commerce, whose mission it is to stimulate innovation, foster individual competitiveness, and improve the quality of life. So we were very serious about our task, and we designed a research plan worthy of the role that we'd been asked to perform. These are the members of the 11-member Baldrige research team. We were encouraged and supported every step of the way by Marilyn Powell, who is a 2019 Baldrige Executive Fellow and who at the time was Vice Provost at Walden University. The team also includes, and I invite you to read the list of names, I won't go through one by one, but I wanted to point out a few. Meredith Wentz, a member of the core research team. Meredith is Assistant Chancellor at the University of Wisconsin-Stout, which, as many of you know, was a 2001 recipient of the Baldrige Award. I also wanted to point out that our team included Audrey Butlett, a librarian at Walden University. And I recommend to all of you who are putting together a research team similar to this, always include a librarian. Audrey was instrumental to helping us do the research needed to identify an effective and functional conceptual framework. And at many other points in our journey, she was there to provide the support and the supporting research that we needed, including data that we will talk about in just a few moments. The team also included Kevin Wilkinson, who was instrumental in helping us with our research methodology. Kevin is an assistant professor at Stout. Also wanted to point out to you that in addition to other graduates of Walden's Doctor of Business Administration program, our research team importantly included Suzanne Collins, the 2018 inaugural recipient of the Kurt Ryman Baldrige Scholarship Award, and other Ryman scholars, Michael Dillard and Alan Turner, here with us today.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. We interviewed the senior leaders of Baldrige Award-winning recipient organizations, specifically organizations that had been receiving top-tier recognition from the Alliance organizations and recognition by committees of excellence. Participant representation in our research study essentially mirrors the current participation in Baldrige programs by sector. Looking back actually at Baldrige awardees over the past 10 years, representation from the healthcare sector has been very consistent in every year, except for 2021, with nonprofit sectors represented over 90% of the time, as well as regular small business and nonprofit sectors. Thank you.
So at the request of the leaders of the Baldrige Performance Excellence Program and the Alliance for Performance Excellence, our research team, as Dr. Garfield indicated, conducted an intensive quality study. So in this quality study, we use quality research, of which researchers seek an in-depth understanding of a situation or phenomenon. And also researchers use a research question to explore that situation through the experiences and personal stories of participants. The research question also helps the researchers to determine the appropriate participants to provide relevant and significant data to support this study. The question also served as our foundation for this study, and the information from the participants were relative to the research question. So our overarching research question for this study is, how does using the Baldrige Performance Excellence Framework impact organizational sustainability and resilience? But in addition to the research question, the conceptual framework helps to cultivate research questions and serves as a tool in analyzing variables or concepts and their interaction for a comprehensive understanding of a situation. The researcher used the conceptual framework to guide the research from its inception to its completion. It also helps researchers thinking when the data comes in. So for this study, we used the general systems theory as the conceptual framework. The general systems theory originated in 1968 by Ludwig von Bartholomä. This theory helps researchers to understand variables within existing processes, to learn how to improve outcomes and reduce costs by enhancing service and product quality, as well as increasing the speed of performance. Also, the critical factor for our selection of the general systems theory or the use of this theory was important to our team because of the theory's history of enabling open workflow value creation to improve outcomes related to organizational sustainability and resilience. Next slide.
The interview protocol, the leaders for the interviews were identified by the Baldrige Performance Excellence Program, the Alliance, and the communities of excellent leaders. Consideration was given to the representation of the different sectors that had achieved a Baldrige Award-related recognition within the last decade. Participants were identified as part of the organization executive leadership. Leaders responded to the research email with their consent to participate. Each participant represented a different organization with no overlap between organizations or participants. Demographic characteristics of the participants were not a focus of the selection process, so the participants' diversity was random. The data collection was done through interviews. Interviews were assigned to participants to conduct the interview based on availability. Interview questions were developed to frame the conversation and reduce redundancy. Interviews were conducted virtually using Microsoft Teams. Interactive video software were recorded, and the transcript function of Microsoft Teams was used to document conversations for later analysis and to determine the different themes. For the data organization, interviews summarize responses and develop a list of themes. The research team members refine themes to reflect the multiple perspectives and interpretations of multidisciplinary group to manage and control varying clarifications of the data. The team's 16 themes were then applied to summarize of each response by the interviewer assigned to the participant. A research team member reviewed summaries, interview responses, and compared the assigned coding to ensure consistency and relevance of the coding. Responses were then grouped by code and sorted through Microsoft Excel. Metrics, measures, and analysis are key components of the continuous improvement process, as evidenced by users across all sectors represented in this study. Leaders stated that they have metrics on their operations and are heavily involved with training and analysis of those vital signs daily, weekly, annually, or based on other cycles. Some leaders of Baldrige Framework using organizations have key performance indicators embedded in their strategic planning and centered in high performance culture, member loyalty, and financial stability. In short, the leaders examine the key metrics in their organization's strategic plan and use the information to improve work processes. The security of the information the research team received was maintained within the team. The person interviewed of the organization name was not shared publicly. The research team only used the type of industries during the information sharing process, color coding, and transcription development. Next slide.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to do a deeper dive on the process we use to review and code the data, picking up on where Alan was talking about. So we used a multiple step, rigorous analysis process for analyzing the data, which included both individual steps and team steps. So just to talk through at a high level what that looked like, we started with the transcriptions of the essence of the interview that were completed by the person conducting the interview. The first assignment was for the person conducting the interview to review that transcript and identify some preliminary thoughts as to what they see as themes from those conversations. Then we got together as a team. We each shared what we found as our preliminary themes, and we reached consensus as a group on a set of themes across all of the interview transcripts. Following that, each person who did the interviews went back and did an initial coding all of those comments into the agreed upon list of themes. And then to ensure additional rigor in the process, we had a team that went through and reviewed that coding to ensure it was consistent across all of the transcripts. So from there, we then counted the number of comments in each of the themes, and that led to the analysis summary that we'll be talking about next. So next slide, please.
So excited to be able to present this data to all of you and to talk about the major themes and key findings. So 94% of respondents and participants discussed embedding the Baldrige criteria into the organization's culture as a key finding toward building resilience during the difficult time of COVID-19. Planning strategically and continuity planning was next, leading with vision and purpose, measuring what matters, valuing people, and sticking with it. And I think we can all reflect back on that period of time and think about how hard it would be sometimes not to just react to every day, but also to continue with the things that we know that work and with the practice of the Baldrige framework. So those organizations who were able to do this reported that these were the things that helped them the most. Interestingly, there were some things that were made it to or the bottom of the list. And one of those was comparative data and benchmarking. So if you're curious about what's at the bottom of the list or what was the least mentioned, that was stakeholder engagement and benchmarking, which makes some sense because we were all kind of in a different place. Also, innovation, adapting to market, sharing and learning about Baldrige, stakeholder engagement and feedback. I mean, these are still within around 44%. I think the lowest was 19% with the comparative data. So we're still at about half we're citing these other themes. But these are the main themes here, these 6 that comprise most of the responses. Go to the next slide.
So as Marilyn just mentioned, during the time of COVID, when we were right in the thick of things and when we were doing this research, we were really in a very different place. The COVID breakout challenged all areas of economics, including the health industry, macroeconomics, finance, development, inequality, political economy, public finance, and more. To create a context for our research, we monitored emerging data during the pandemic from the Center for Economic Policy Research, The Economist, Harvard Business Review, the National Bureau of Economic Research, the Census Bureau, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and more. And as the pandemic lingers on, and we now have a war in Europe, we've continued to monitor these data.
Okay. Expanding on what Drs. Dillard Turner and Wentz, in addition to Ms. Powell previously stated, we found that the financial and marketplace metrics continued to show excellent levels, beneficial trends, and in addition to leadership in comparison to benchmarks. Furthermore, not surprisingly, we found that operating margins continue to demonstrate best performance in the state at one organization, while at the Baldrige Award-winning nonprofit, unrestricted net assets continue to grow and outpace peer comparisons. It was encouraging to see this information unfold in the results of this research.
Leadership, workforce, customers with the overlay of strategy is what helps sustain high profitability among the organizations. The Baldrige framework focused on how organizations can improve on things that they did best and were able to improve on during the pandemic. Furthermore, the Baldrige framework helped pick out the most effective elements, including return on equity, revenue, surplus balances, days of cash on hand, and progress toward 100% funding. Adopting Baldrige framework to manage an organization's operational needs to be thorough, gradual learning and understanding. Baldrige framework focuses on the alignment and integration of multiple processes. During the interview process, an executive director for planning, research, and organizational development for Baldrige Top Tier Alliance program advised, you must understand what you have and what you need to prioritize and maintain the needs of your customer. Top Tier Alliance programs grew its customer subscriber base and earned almost 100% customer retention, and another maintained a very high service scores throughout the crisis. Next slide.
Yeah, so one exciting story from a company doing our research, we learned that a top tier alliance company who continued to use the Baldrige Performance Excellence Framework during the pandemic, They continue to compete to be named as one of the best companies for people to work. And by using the Baldrige framework continuously, the company increased its scores, exceeded other high-performing companies from 2016 to 2020, and continued to exceed performance during the pandemic in 2021.
This same organization's rate of employee turnover fell from a below average 14% before COVID to just 5% in early 2021. Much as we would all like to work for an organization with such high levels of workforce engagement, there are currently no positions open at that company today. The president and the CEO noted that taking care of employees means that they in turn take care of customers, resulting in what he calls a perfect circle of workforce and customer engagement. Gallup's recently released data on the 2021 global workforce show that employers everywhere are experiencing stress at the highest levels ever recorded. Levels of workforce worry, anger, and sadness are above pre-pandemic stress levels. For example, 44% of the world's employees indicated that they experienced a lot of stress the previous day. So think about it. What was your own level of stress yesterday? An example from our Baldrige using population comes from a nonprofit recipient of multiple Baldrige Awards. This organization's target for Gallup Q12 Employee Engagement Survey is the 88th through the 92nd percentile range. That's their target. Since the spring of 2020, the darkest days of COVID-19, the organization has scored in the 95th percentile for all US organizations.
Organizational success depends on an engaged workforce that benefits from meaningful work, clear organizational direction, learning opportunities, and performance accountability. Employee satisfaction and the Net Promoter Score for employee engagement remain well above the peer average benchmark through the pandemic from 2019 to 2021 for Baldrige Award-winning nonprofit organization. The leaders interview noted that the value of having the right people in the right place and the right people doing the right jobs is vital to their success. A leader's commitment to employees is imperative to build an excellent and sustainable culture. Throughout this period, employee turnover remained well below the comparative data benchmark.
And one final impressive story from this data collection process is from a manufacturing organization that has won multiple Baldrige Awards. And throughout the interview, their conversation was all about the importance of placing a high priority on employee retention and employee engagement. And you can see it on the statistics listed here on the screen. They did see some decline from 2020 to 2021. However, they maintained very impressive levels. Employee engagement remained above 70% and employee retention remained above 80%. Next slide, please.
And so we've had an opportunity to share just some examples of the results that we achieved through our Baldrige research project. And now we invite your questions.
And we've got a number of really good questions here. And the first one, Marilyn, is going to go to you. 94% of the senior leaders in the study identified embedding Baldrige into the organizational culture as a key strategy to help ensure resilience. As a Baldrige Executive Fellow and senior leader in the education sector, what are your thoughts about the value of embedding Baldrige in the organizational culture?
Well, I think the data speaks for itself, and it supports what we've learned and what we know anecdotally, as well as now with some science behind it, that there is a inherent value in having a framework and using the Baldrige framework in particular in how organizations plan, lead, go forward, interact with customers, and fulfill all of those key promises and obligations to internal and external stakeholders. So I think the essential piece of working toward bringing everyone together in a way that we have common understanding, common language, common pushing forward to meet these key performance indicators and to serve the populations we're seeking to serve is just so critical. And I think this was such a great finding because it does underscore the need for this framework to be used widely.
Thank you. This next question goes to Suzanne. On slide 6, you used a pie chart. What were you hoping the audience would take away from using that pie chart?
Thank you for the question, sir. We had interviewed the senior leaders of Baldrige Award recipient organizations, and particularly in this study, we wanted to be able to highlight at a glance the sectors that were involved so that perhaps it would entice the audience of reading our study to perhaps dig a little deeper if they saw that there was an organization of sector that represented their business focus.
Okay. This next question goes to the entire group here. I'll let somebody determine who should answer it. What specific strategies did the senior leaders that you interviewed say were the most effective?
I can start off. First of all, it was very interesting to talk to the senior leaders to learn exactly what they thought about strategic planning and how to get it down to the lowest level. And one of the exciting learnings I found out through my interview with my senior leaders was the employee engagement that was mentioned earlier, but not only the employee engagement, but the continuous improvement process whereby they got the employees engaged in and got them informed about the strategic plan and the vision and the goals of the company, but also getting feedback from those employees on the front line as to what's working, what's not working, to help them improve their process and achieve their goals. So the interesting thing about the senior leaders at that point was they understood that they had to communicate even further to the frontline employees by different means of technology, such as Zoom, Microsoft Teams, SharePoint, and so forth, which they had not used before extensively to inform the employees of what's going on with the strategic planning and how they were achieving their particular performance measurements or goals, and also to help them get to their final destination as to achieving results or certain performance measures through the key indicators within the company. So I thought it was very exciting how to use the employees to help them achieve their goals.
Just to jump on the back of what Michael was saying, the strategic planning always came up and then kind of broke down into the continuity planning or tactical planning. But the key part of that is that they implemented the plan. They didn't just have a plan sitting on a shelf, and the employees all knew what the plan was. So that to me, because I do planning for a living, and that to me was probably the most impressive part, that how they were able to implement the plan and not just have the plan on the shelf in the folder. So that and the employees knew what was in the plan.
And I'll just add on to that, strategic planning was a key part of the conversations that I was a part of as well. And from the perspective that the Baldrige framework helped them do aspects of strategic planning that they were already good at, even better, and to become better at the things they're not very good at. So the specific example was this organization felt like they were really good at reacting quickly to opportunities. And the Baldrige framework helped them to do that better. But what they didn't realize is they were not as good as the longer term planning, focusing on those opportunities that are most important, investing the most resources in those key things that are most important to them. So the Baldrige framework helped them get better at what they were already good at, that quick response to opportunities, but also to develop new procedures, processes around that longer term thinking.
Well, we're all going to have stories about strategic planning, and I have one from a Baldrige Award-winning nonprofit. Because the pandemic or a pandemic has been part of our horizon for a long time, certainly since the influenza, 1914. This one organization's the leaders of the organization emphasized strategic scenario planning. Their approach to strategic planning included the development of several what-if scenarios. And based on the research they'd been doing, pandemic was one of those scenarios. So they had fully planned for what the organization would do in the event of a pandemic. When the lockdown was announced, the employees of that organization, an essential service, simply closed their laptops and went home. And they had access to all of the confidential data and information they needed about their clients and customers, and they just kept going. There wasn't so much as a pause in their business continuity. And I thought that was quite impressive, and a reason we all might want to consider the approach of strategic scenario planning as we move ahead in strategic planning, which I'll just remind you was the second highest in terms of the responses from our recipients at 88%.
Our next question goes to the entire group as well. What were your aha moments when analyzing data and information that gathered from senior leaders that you interviewed?
I can go. I think the biggest aha moment was how they did the planning, from top down to the bottom, and how they knew how to implement it. It was almost like they could plug a crisis in. They had the framework of the plan already set to go, and they can whatever the crisis was, just fill in the blank. So that was very impressive. Again, that's I do the planning for a living, and just listening to how they plan, especially the strategic, because strategic is completely different than any other type of planning. It's like you almost have to tell the future if you're a good strategic planner. So that was really my aha moment.
Yeah, Alan, one thing that to add to that too, I was very impressed when I talked to the leaders about the strategic planning, is that they were adaptable and agile to the changes they had to make for the pandemic. We used to use the plan as the all be all, success, all whatever you want to call it. But when I would talk to the senior leaders, when they tried to implement things throughout the strategic plan, they were not always hooked on this is the actual way it has to go. They were agile and they adapted based on the environment and based on the changes and the customers throughout the pandemic.
I'll add an additional example. It's hard to pull out for me just one aha moment, because I find these conversations so inspiring, and I leave all of them feeling like, do you have a job for me at your organization? But one quote that really stood out for me in a leader that I talked to who's been with the Baldrige framework for a long time, he said, I never questioned whether we would continue to use the framework. I only questioned whether we would apply. So just going back to the title of the study about sustainability and resilience, thinking about that attitude over a long period of time, over a pandemic, I just thought it was really impressive to hear that from him.
I've had an aha moment. I've had several, and they're always different. We completed this research, I think last September, not quite a year ago. And I'm amazed at how many different things come forward in my thinking at different times, depending on the circumstances in the environment. But one of the things that I think about consistently, it didn't come up in our results at all. It's an underlying fact that these senior leaders have tremendous courage. Whether it's announcing a big, hairy, audacious goal, we're going to go after Baldrige, or just saying we're going to stick with it, or we're going to do scenario planning, or whatever it might be, they have extraordinary courage. And that's part of sticking with it. That's part of the accountability that they required. And it's an underlying concept that I think about a great deal.
Okay, this next question goes to the entire group as well. How did the leaders get workforce buy-in to embed the Baldrige framework as a tool for success?
I talked to the senior leaders and part of their communication process, like I mentioned earlier, through a lot of virtual technology, through Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and SharePoint, different newsletters. They actually did a lot of posting of information to the employees to ensure they understood what those criteria were and why they were important. And also with that, they received feedback to determine if those criteria from the framework actually was working at their level. And by that, they kind of learned exactly what the senior leaders were using to try to get them to the point of success. And they continue to communicate back and forth with the leaders within the offices and the frontline employees to ensure that what they were looking at through the framework was being effective and efficient for the company.
When I was doing my interviews, the vision, mission, customer, strategic advantages always came up. So they always look back at what their original mission and vision statements were.
Adding on to what the other members of the team have discussed, in speaking with my specific organization, one of the key factors, as is the case with many organizations, you have requirements where you need to maintain licensure, certification, accreditation. And this organization was already doing well by their standards, but they discovered that upon applying the principles of the framework, that it made it much easier for them to achieve and sustain certification and accreditation in other aspects of their business. And it became, by example, in being able to show others in the organization how the use of this framework was helping them in these specific areas. It made it easier for them to apply that across the board to other parts of the organization. So that was very encouraging to learn that, once they saw that the results of their efforts, others were more encouraged to undertake the process. And one of the great things about the Baldrige program is that it forces them, as my client said, to have uncomfortable conversations, and that they became eventually more comfortable with being uncomfortable. And in the process, they benefited from that.
And I'll just build off of that concept of seeing it. The organization that I worked with, the leader started off by himself, writing the Baldrige application and submitting it without help from anybody else. But he had to do almost nothing once the report came back and once the leaders could see it and see the Baldrige framework, that they were immediately on board. He said he hardly had to do anything to bring them along. They saw the product that they came back, they saw the framework, and they were on board.
We have time for one more question. And the final question is, what are your thoughts or recommendations on how your research could be used to increase participation in the Baldrige program?
I think that once you read the study and look at the themes and some of the learnings from other senior leaders, and they'll talk about their successes and some of the trials and tribulations they have gone through, as you see through the study, just kind of reading through it, that I think the other senior leaders will understand that there's a good use and a good method that's out there they can utilize to help them succeed, achieve success within their company during good times or times whereby they are not used to experiencing.
And I think dissemination is key. We're grateful to the Baldrige Foundation for publishing our white paper last January. When I read that white paper, it's like Quest in a box. It's everything that we hear when we go to the Quest for Performance Excellence from the mouths of senior leaders and those who have been instrumental in developing those role model best practices at these award-winning organizations. So I would recommend spreading the word, using the white paper and other opportunities to share these quantitative and qualitative data. As we've said, the promise of confidentiality means that we will not reveal our research participants, but they are welcome to come forward and say, that was me, that was us, and continue to promote what they know and what they do.
And I'll just add that for me, one thing that really stood out is the really impressive results. If you look at the environment today, businesses are going out of business, people are leaving organizations, and here we see the opposite in these results. We see organizations where there are no positions open. We see results continuing to improve, continuing to stay at high levels. I think it's hard to find any organizations right now that are experiencing that during these difficult times. And the other thing that I would add is that you can start small. You don't need to look at the framework or the study and say, I need to do all of this. You can look at it and say, this theme really stood out to me. What can I do? What more can I do to advance this one item within my organization?
And just to piggyback off of that, I just, yeah, I agree with how the framework is written, because it is a framework. It's not a operating guide. It's not it's a dance floor that you can build your own plans off of. You can your flow of information using it from the different categories. So and then you just look at the statistics for employee involvement and satisfaction in the organizations compared to other organizations that don't use it.
And one final note I'd like to add, following on what Dr. Garfield Winston-Turner has said, that basically our white paper, it's fairly light reading compared to some other research papers you might be involved in, but at least it's a primer. It gives you a start. And then I'd recommend, hey, take a look at the NIST.gov website and review some of the award-winning applications there to get some ideas of how other sectors that are closely matching your organization have performed, the information that they've put forth, on the website. And I believe that may encourage you, as the others said, to at least start out small and said, hey, you know what, if this can work for them, maybe we can try it here in this particular area of our business, and then go from there. And then you'll find it becomes almost like a snowball effect, that once individuals see the success of applying it, that it's easier to do in other areas. And as we found in our research at the beginning of the process, for some it was a bit of an uphill sell, and so it helped that those specific leaders at least were able to apply it in a small area of the business. But in the process of going through the framework and asking those uncomfortable questions, it really forced them to recognize that there were areas where they had black holes that they had not examined, and that once they shone the light in there and started to dig out the answers, that it really helped them to to develop a more cohesive system, because essentially the organization is a system. Everything is connected, and as you go through the process, you come to realize how much everything is connected, and that you cannot really do too much in isolation in a business and be successful. It has to be a holistic approach ultimately. Thank you.
Well, Jan, Meredith, Marilyn, Suzanne, Michael, and Alan, thank you for such an engaging presentation today. We truly appreciate it. As a reminder to our audience, if we did not get to your question, we will get to it in the post-webinar phase, and we will ask our presenters today to respond to your question. Our slides and a recording of this webinar will be available on the Foundation website early next week. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Bob Fangmeyer for an update from the Baldrige Performance Excellence Program. Bob?
Thanks, Al. And I want to thank Jan and her whole team for your work on this initiative. I think it was fantastic and really helpful. I would like to offer just a couple of thoughts based on some of the recent comments. First, role model organizations don't stay role model if they stop doing what made them and helped them achieve the performance in the first place. And sometimes we see that. And I think some of what you learn from those organizations demonstrates that as well. And Jan, your aha moment around courageous leadership, I would add that leaders in Baldrige almost universally demonstrate a certain level of humility. They recognize and they're willing to admit that they have opportunities to improve, both as individuals and as organizations. So those are two areas that I personally think are also critical. So I wanted to just comment that I think this particular webinar is one that is especially appropriate for the update that I need to give. Many of you know that with the last revisions to the Baldrige framework, we beefed up the content related to and enabling of organizational agility and resilience. And as you've just heard, the framework offers a lot of guidance and benefit to organizations of all kinds that need to demonstrate agility and resilience in order to ensure their sustainability and future success. And today, that would seem to be just about every organization, including the Baldrige program and the extended Baldrige community. So I'm showing the slide here on our purpose and our mission. I like to remind folks of both of those because I just think it's important to keep that as context as we talk about what we do. And these things drive pretty much everything that we do. So today I'm going to focus my comments on the recently announced decision to pause the award process and to step back and engage with an independent external organization to conduct a comprehensive review of the Baldrige program and the Baldrige Award. Oh, sorry. So what's the purpose? Why are we doing this? Well, many of you know that we are always reviewing our processes and our offerings for improvement opportunities. We do this every year or two, and we make incremental improvements on a regular and recurring basis. However, it is less common, although certainly it's not unheard of, for us to take a look at the bigger picture and seek opportunities for innovation and transformational change, which will help create some dramatic improvements in our operations, our offerings, our reach, and our impact. And that is the intent of this external review, to help us explore how we can be even more effective in our purpose and in our mission. So what's the process we're going to go through? Well, we are working now to finalize a statement of work and a request for proposals that will be offered to a number of qualified organizations that are found on the General Services Administration's schedule of approved vendors. Those organizations will be given a certain amount of time to respond. And based on the responses we receive, we will select the one that appears to be most able to perform the work needed within the given time frame. We will, of course, provide that organization with a lot of pertinent data and information. However, you should know that a key part of the requirement for this study is that the organization engage with the Baldrige community and our key stakeholders in order to ensure a broad and a deep understanding of Baldrige, how things currently work, and of course, what opportunities there might be. We do have a tight timeline, a very tight timeline, and we are hoping to have a preliminary report on the potential changes to the award process by this November, and on other aspects of the program by January 31st. This will, of course, be dependent upon our ability to get through the government contracting process very, very quickly, and that is always a challenge. So just a few comments. We really do see this as a huge opportunity to elevate the interest in ensuring that the program is as successful as it can be. We have the top leadership in the Department of Commerce paying attention to the program, leveraging the program with certain strategic initiatives, and also focused on how it can be enhanced in order to improve our ability to move the needle on accomplishing our purpose. Commerce has expressed an interest in reinvigorating the Baldrige program and the award And that began in conversations I had with them well over a year ago. This is something that many of us in the Baldrige community have been striving to do, trying to figure out how to do for a long time. So this isn't something new to our thinking. But what's new is that we've raised this to a whole new level. Commerce is now part of this process and will at some level own the decisions and the future success of Baldrige. And that's a very good thing, as it could very well lead to far more engagement and support of Baldrige by NIST, by the department, by Congress, and perhaps even the White House. It's also important to realize that this is, as mentioned, just an extension of what we always do. This external review will incorporate the learnings and the recommendations that have come from our current and our previous improvement efforts. But again, this is an opportunity to reimagine a more vigorous, a more far-reaching, and a more impactful future. I'm excited by the potential, but I do recognize that this is and will be challenging. However, with the support that we have from our extended community, and with an agile and resilient Baldrige ecosystem, I'm confident that this will ultimately result in great things for the Baldrige program and the entire Baldrige enterprise. And so with that, I will turn it back over to Al.
Bob, we do have a couple questions. The
Sure,
first
great.
one is, are the Alliance programs also pausing to wait for this review also, or are organizations able to continue through the Alliance programs in their journey to Baldrige?
That's an excellent question. And the answer is no. Alliance programs are not pausing. There's no reason for them to pause. And in fact, even within the Baldrige program and everything else that we do, all of those things continue as normal. We are finalizing, middle of collecting and vetting inputs for changes to the framework. We will be rolling out the new versions of the framework this December and January. Our Executive Fellows program continues. Quest for Excellence will continue next year, et cetera. So our offerings will also continue.
The next question is, will there be a Quest 2023 conference?
Yeah, I just touched on that. Absolutely. We are planning to have a Quest conference in 2023. It'll look a little bit different without an award process this year. We won't have current recipients to highlight. So we are looking at integrating some thematic areas and bringing in some sort of unique, perhaps, I won't say unusual, but some uncommon, perhaps, speakers that aren't normally a part of our conference, which we think will actually be very engaging and will help organizations and individuals see different perspectives.
Okay, Bob. Well, thank you so much for that update from the Baldrige program. And once again, thanks to you and everybody at the Baldrige program for all that you're doing for us and support. A few more updates from around the Baldrige enterprise from the Baldrige Foundation. We have a couple upcoming webinars in July. We're going to hear from Stratix Solutions as they talk about strategic planning and agility in managing change, as well as Paul Worstel's A Culture of Excellence in August. In addition to that, the 2023 Foundation Leadership Awards are now open for nominations. Please consider nominating a deserving leader. From the Alliance for Performance Excellence, as a reminder, the Baldrige Fall Conference will be held on October 19th and 20th in San Diego, California. Please log on to the Alliance website for more details on the conference and to register. From Communities of Excellence is now accepting applications for new communities for part of their 2022-2023 Learning Collaborative, which will begin this October. Please visit the COE 2026 website for more information. And once again, thanks to all of our donors and sponsors, especially the members of the Mac Baldrige Society who serve as the Institute's trustees. It's their generous support that make programs like today possible. Thank you once again, everybody, for tuning in. Please be safe and have a great day.